we say this term, we say above, down, inside, out. And to me, that is the big idea. And to me, what that has come to represent is that life is happening through you, not to you. Sometimes the most guttural things, because they kept you in the squeeze long enough that you had to determine how do I survive in here, right? You do that for me, Devin, too. And I think that's part of when you realize that there is more to the physical world that's unfolding than what meets the eye,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which I feel we're having more and more of these conversations, but maybe it's just me, but it's now it's a different conversation. It's almost like the veil is so thin between what am I experiencing, and then also what's being what physically meets the eye
Mm-hmm.
now.
Big idea, friends and family. I am here with one of my soul sisters, one of my sheroes, one of my mentors, one of my dear, dear friends. She has come to multiple big ideas to speak. She's come to Wichita to serve, her big, big truth, her big, big heart. And as I, relaunch a podcast and I look at whose voices I want to put front and center for our practice, for my kids, for our community and the world, Lona Cook is up there at the top of that list. So, sister, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, Devin, it's always a pleasure for our conversations. I was going, into life with you right before this, and I'm oh, I could just listen to you. You have so much wisdom.
We've
Mm.
covered a lot of ground, you and
Yeah.
I, over
Yeah,
these
yeah.
last few years. A lot of babies, a lot of chiropractic, a lot of travel. So, one of the reasons that I've brought you to Wichita to share at Big Idea is because your vision is so big and so expansive. And yet you are a home birth goddess. You are a phenomenal mother of two boys. You're super rooted. You have very close relationships with your team, able to open, different offices and serve, but also big again and expansive where you take chiropractic and you put it into the school system. So you have this roots and wings, this, you can do it all, but you certainly don't have to do it all by yourself. So I'm eager to, bring you here to ask you some of those questions of how you're able to do that. And we'll start off with the question that, we lead off on podcast is what's the big idea, right? You've gone to school, you've gone to events, you've met a lot of people, you've had a lot of life, but if you were going to pass on one wisdom to your two boys and you said this is the big idea, and if you get this big idea, then all else follows, what would that be?
Well, the big idea, just using those three words, encompasses a lot to me. And I think first to recognize that you are connected, you are connected to it all, and it's all also within, and it's both, which is a hard thing to even wrap our brains around. In fact, I think we have a really, really hard time even trying to put that into words, right? And in chiropractic, we say this term, we say above, down, inside, out. And to me, that is the big idea. And to me, what that has come to represent is that life is happening through you, not to you. And you are connected, right? Your system is a receiver and a transmitter. And this nervous system we have is how we send out our tone that intermingles in our experience and co-creates it. And that is a big idea because you realize you are connected to it all.
Now,
It's hard to really go down that rabbit hole with people.
it is. And it's one of those, I think, red pills that, when you do get it, you can't unget it, right? It literally changes your lens. So if you take me back when you got the bigness of, man, I'm a part of the trees and the sun and every other person that is on this planet with me, and you're that big, and yet we're so small, right? And it's the day to day. When did you get the big idea, or what things have brought you closer to it?
Yeah. I think my awakening, if you will, happened through a series of challenges, which I think it happens for many people that way because life has a way of squeezing you to wake up. So I was actually held up at gunpoint in 2009, which I think was the embodiment of do not pass go. You are knocking your head against the wall in all senses. And that a humbling experience that followed was where I really, it's almost like the record went like in my life went, right? I was like, no, how you have been walking life out where I thought that I could force things was not going to be the thing that got us to the next place. I was not going to be able to keep walking through life that way. And so there was, again, probably many things that led up to that point, but that to me was like the like shift that happened where I was actually, when I stopped forcing and I can surrender to some of what was unfolding in my life and realize I could change myself, I could think different thoughts, I could see from a different perspective. It was uncanny. I'm telling you how my life shifted, in not that there wasn't a lot of hard stuff that came later on after that. It's just I realized I was part of that. Like I
Mm.
had a choice in how I responded. I had a choice in like even how I labeled myself. Like in the past, it would have been like, that's just me, right? This is how I
Mm.
am. And it's like, no.
As if the
You-
wiring can't change, right? Like that, yeah. And you've shared in past, conversations a concept of divine encounters and divine invitations in this instance, right? Of where we can frame literally anything as a challenge, a hardship, an obstacle, in that victim lens,
Mhm.
or in the ADIO, in this offering, at least like that's been a shift, a big one, that it's, if it's happening, it's meant to happen, and it becomes an opportunity. Practically though, right? This all sounds good. And we sit here and we were talking before we jumped onto this about some really hard stuff. Like it's not like you get this and then life is easy when you're squeezed, because I know you still get squeezed, right? You're a mom, you're a wife, you're a boss, you're all these chiropractor, all these things. You still get squeezed. Life's in your world too. How do you practically remember this and walk in it?
Mhm. Devin, like you, I think sometimes the like most guttural things, because they kept you in the squeeze long enough that you had to determine like, how do I survive in here? Right? Where you're asking yourself this question, because we can have this knowledge, but when we apply it, especially in the hard stuff where you're like, okay, somehow this is meant for me. And perhaps I can like take on just for a moment a different perspective on it for a second. Maybe when I'm in my human form, just looking at it right up close, it feels so like it's going to smush you, you know? Um, but if I can realize like, I'm like one soul having this experience right now. I don't know the bigger picture. And I had to see it outside myself before I could really let it be honored in the way that I looked at my life, which still is challenging at times. Don't get me wrong. I had to realize like I don't think it's random how the trees shed their leaves and then grow new ones, and all the cycles that we can see. And then you get into like Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio showing up in nature, and it's like, man, there's organization present. Right? Like, wow, like how a baby is formed, right? So then I realized like everything is energy, and it's not just physical energy, right? It's not just like my meat suit. It's also the thoughts I think, the words I speak. It's all creating tone, which is a chiropractic word too. Tone means vibration. It's like tone. There's tone to the muscle, of course, there's tone to the body, but there's also tone to the aura, tone to the like space you walk into. And when I started to realize that I had choice in how my own tone would handle something, meaning I could rail against it and get angry because that might have been like the mechanism I was used to with something. Or I could realize, is that anger what I want to feel right now? It doesn't make anger wrong, right? Sometimes anger is actually healing, right? But if that's not the dominant state I want to live in, I have a choice. Maybe my choice is to just feel neutral. Maybe my choice is to look for a blessing there. Again, that's not toxic positivity. It's realizing like I can be adaptable here.
Right.
And for me, that's how I practically learned how to walk it out. It was like learning how to practically control my internal state. So now when I feel triggered or contracted, doesn't mean that I don't have those experiences. It's just the blip in the radar there is a lot less long of a duration, generally speaking, that I will stay in that lane. So
Or
when I
intense, right? It's not as chaotic, right?
correct. When I speak to audience as a joke, like if I'm speaking to like I just did a talk to teachers, right? And it was like 600 teachers. And my example was in 2020, I was set to have a baby. And the birth plan changed at 37 and a half weeks. Well, my elder son was born at 37 weeks. So in my head, I'm like, this baby is upon us, right? And my midwife wasn't going to be able to be at my birth, and I was going to have a different midwife, and we had different philosophical values on a lot of things. And I was angry. And anger is not my like dominant state. So I'm driving to meet this new midwife, and I'm frustrated, and I'm driving fast, but I'm not paying attention. Right. And my son in the back seat says, "Hey, mom, how fast does this car go?" And I was like, Jack, I don't know, fast. And I like still driving. Right. That's my nudge. Jack's my nudge there of like, slow down, get yourself back in state. Like, I really believe our external reflects our internal. Right. Of course, you guys can know, I guess what happened next. Like, I got pulled over, got a massive ticket, but I know enough to know that, like, ooh, that was like the universe, God showing me, like, lady, you better slow your tone down. Like, this is not gonna like manifest well, right? And then Jack in the back seat goes, "Dad and I will bail you out of jail." He's my ride or die, right? And I was like, I laughed. I'm like, I am making this a problem. And the funny part is Max, my second born, was born at 41 weeks. Right. So and my midwife was back from her situation and all was well. But our human mind gets so bent out of shape that we could somehow control all these things and that we know better. And now I'm frustrated. Right. And I let myself stay there long enough that other stuff. So, that's a humorous version of it. Right. But
You pay attention though, like
yes.
to those signals around you. And you brought up toxic positivity, and I've definitely been labeled that from some different people. Like, you can't just love and light everything. And it's like, yes, and right, like it's not dismissal. It's not burying head in sand. It's a choice. Or like Abraham Hicks, it's like maybe you don't swing it from hard to easy. Maybe you just take a nap. Maybe you
Mhm.
just take a walk. Maybe
Mhm.
you just change the channel so that you're not hyper focused on this thing that's making you nuts.
Yes.
Because it is a choice. And I think you really, again, if I nudge back to why I want to bring you here, is you're one of those um adjusters for me when I can feel myself hyper focused on something. You do invite, like, what if like we just loosen our grip and shift, and you always remind me this is a choice, that
Mhm.
you're stewing on this thing. It doesn't make it better by you picking at the scab,
Mhm.
right?
Well, and you do that for me, Devin, too. And I think that's part of like when you realize that there is more to the physical world that's unfolding than what meets the eye,
Hmm.
right? Which I feel we're having more and more of these conversations, but maybe it's just me. But it's like now, like, it's a different conversation. It's almost like the veil is so thin between like, what am I experiencing? And then also what's being like, what physically meets the eye
Hmm.
now? Because I
Hmm.
just changed the channel in myself. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, my life shifts differently, right? It
Yeah.
seems to someone who doesn't maybe understand that,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
it's not connected, but you cannot prove to me otherwise at this point that there is not some sort of massive like interconnection between all of this, right?
If people are newer in to not maybe hearing it, but really like trusting it, right? Because there is a difference. Like, you can get a big idea, but like putting it into action is different. Do you have a couple of favorite books or people that you turn to? Like, what's your village look like? Is it the Dispenzas and the Liptons, or like what would you recommend to somebody that's like, I hear these women, but I want to understand it better?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yes, actually, I had a good conversation yesterday that was like, how do you create breakthroughs, right? And on some level, there has to be the time and space for it. So that may come in the form of a book. It may be coming listening to a podcast. It may come just time alone with yourself, right? And if I think back on my own ahas, right? Like there were all of those different things and multiples, right? And so Jack just got home from school. So when I think about like a book that I'm constantly giving out in the office, one of them, and it's more relational to what you're experiencing in your body, is Louise Hay, You Can Heal Your Life,
Yep.
which starts the understanding that your mind body is so intimately connected and your body is not random. Your body is like your true north, right? And we have been taught something that has really, really hurt us, which is to not listen to our bodies and to not trust our bodies. And so that's one of the untruths that we have to unwind for ourselves is like, what if my body is my best friend and is constantly showing me where this tone and the way I'm walking things out, or the way I'm looking at the lens I'm choosing, is actually the thing that's creating disharmony, disease in our bodies, right? So I like that book because I think it's very simple and it helps you understand the concepts of more of this like interconnection.
Yep.
I'd start there.
So good. Timeless. I mean, she's like the fairy godmother of that conversation. Um, let's talk about kids. Two aspects. If I said, what's the big idea for mothers these
Mhm.
days? Because we're living in, I think kids, we could agree that we don't know what's coming next. There's a lot of chaos in the system, which I want to wager that that means brighter days are ahead, because in the unknown, like new miracles, new world, new possibility and potential is coming. So I think we're being kind of birthed, and we're feeling the feels of it. What big idea would you specifically share with mothers right now?
Mm. Well, becoming the mother, right, is one of those like sacred rites, again, that I think we haven't had good communication or good, Devin, you and I have talked about the idea of like a tent of women, the red tent. We haven't had that community real easily in many of our family units,
Mm,
of like the older woman helping the younger woman become and
mm,
trusting their own system as they go through this journey of literally bringing life into the world. Instead, we've been kind of taught that this is just like a very sterile thing that happens. Jack, just 1 second. I'm finished.
mm, mm.
Can you come back in 5 minutes? Are you editing
He's
this?
gonna join us. Well, we sure can.
Okay. What?
Does he need you? Yeah.
Okay. All right. See you in a little bit. Okay. Anyways, motherhood, right?
There
Yeah.
it is. And that's what, like, why even that is the presence that you were able to just shift into is like, I think that's a requirement today with as chaotic and fast paced as time is, of being able to govern our internal gears. Now, go ahead.
So, um, what I say there is like, to me, whether no matter what type of birth you're after, like there is a massive shift that happens with every child you bring in, because you are birthing a new version of yourself, right? And that level of trust and learning how to like listen to your system as well as your child's system is something I think we could steward so much better as a like as a humanity, and to me that is a critical part right now, is nurturing the idea of motherhood and like the understanding that this is a spiritual and a physical and a mental emotional process,
Yep.
and that sometimes the really really tough stuff in it too is actually the medicine, right? It is the way through it
Mhm.
to to journey into parts of yourself that you're going to love to meet, but it's disguised as like, oh man, this is rough, right? And I think if we had better support
Mhm.
and ears that have walked through some of it in a way that also honors like your journey is going to be different than mine, but there's some truths here I could share with you, right?
Mm.
Like I think we could handle that more gently and probably have a lot less fallout in maternal health as well as the health of our children. So finding your community of women, and I know for myself, that midwife that I shared the story that I didn't know if she was going to be at my birth, she was, at the time I had my first child, I'm guessing she was late 50s, early 60s. After I saw her ninja moves helping me birth this child, and also the confidence she gave me of like not only that I was going to be able to have this birth, but also the things that would come after it, and just her certainty, it was like,
Mm.
man, she just propped me up when I didn't have it myself. And I think are those of us who have had children and have seen the ability to sit with process, right?
Yeah.
Because that's one thing that our society is learning. Like a fever is a good point, like a good example of that, right? Like our ability to sit with that process, which
Mhm.
99.9% of times is like a totally healthy, we really don't have anything to worry about there, but we've been taught to fear it. When
Mm.
in fact, it's actually the thing that catapults that child's nervous system into next levels of growth, better immune system, all the things. It's like an innate process, right?
Mm.
Um, we haven't been taught to listen to that, and also that you don't have to fear these things. And so to me, that's part of like maternal support right now would be finding your one person or maybe a tribe of women who can help doula you into like the stages that your children are becoming too, where it's like, that's normal, you're good, you got it. Yeah, let's take a look here,
Yeah,
that's
we
critical.
borrow courage from each other. And
Yes.
we're going to wrap up, but I would love your little elevator pitch, so to speak, if there's somebody out there who doesn't get their kids adjusted and you're
Mhm.
doing a lot of work in your practice, but also in the school. So you're seeing, because it's not just chaotic for adults right now, it's chaotic for kids. So the triggers, the social media, technology, toxicity in food and air and water. I mean, kids are being bombarded by stressors, right? So of course, I believe they need to be adjusted. I would love to hear, if you're speaking out to parents about what you've seen in the school, but just in general, why would it be important to get kids checked right now?
Yeah. Okay. So I had a conversation again yesterday with Dr. Bobby, who I do a podcast with, and he had said, when you're describing something to someone and they don't have context for like even a visual on it, it's hard sometimes to like convey what you mean. So he gave the example of describing an engine, which I don't know that much about engines, right? So he described like how pistons works and how there's combustions happening, and like if you have more explosions in the engine happening, that means there's more power, right? So like, and so the way he went through and described it, I was like, okay, that gave me so much more context, right? For just understanding what he was even talking about. If he would have just said an engine with more power, I've been like, okay.
Right.
So my point there is like, I forget, I'm sure Devin, you forget, like many of the people we talk to don't have a lot of context for understanding the nervous system and even how this like whole system flows energy, right? And so when you really think about like we're electromagnetic, our systems have energy coursing through us, which is why we're different than like just the mechanics of like a dead body. I'm going to be graphic there, but that has all the parts, but life force is missing, right? The energy is missing. Our nervous system is like that clearinghouse moving that energy. And so the spine isn't really that exciting, but the spine is the bony protection around that. And the more rapport in that system there is, and like how that tone moves, leads to better resiliency and better adaptability. So our kids can adapt to all the things coming at them in messages, in hard stuff at school, in just physical things they're doing. It's again that whole conversation that this is not just about like, oh, they fell off the monkey bars. This is about all the things that their brains are having to process and their little bodies wear, because if their systems can't process, it sticks, right? Which is why to me this is like so much bigger than just what's happening at the physical body, but we got to start at the physical body, which is the physical body is part of that clearinghouse right now. And your
Yep.
nervous system's importance for no matter if you're 2 days old or 92 years old, your nervous system is transmitting that energy and processing it.
And it can come in forms of sicknesses or diseases, constipation, coughs, things like this. It can come in anxiety and depression with this, system shutting down. It can come in hyperactivity and, there's kids are throwing us red flags for help right now.
For sure.
And everything sinks down in what you're saying of like everything has to filter through the nervous system and its ability to handle development on top of bodily functions, on top of school, on top of, and so to best set them up, we want to give them as, best chance as we can by being able to move through those things because childhood is a lot.
Yeah, for sure. For life is a lot for all of
And
us, right?
and you're saying and I think each of us, it's like we grew up in a very different world. So I think we probably underestimate what they're going through because it looks the same, but it's not the same on so many levels, right? Well, I know we're gonna have you back and open that Pandora's box even more because we're both just on a mission to really show up for the kids in this time and make this our new awakening into a better world. So I appreciate your time today and I'm gonna make sure that you guys will be seeing Lona. I'm sure she'll be back in Wichita, back for a big idea. And you're just one of my favorite humans. So thank you for the light that you shine into this world, sister.
Right back at
Appreciate it. Guys, we will see you soon. Make sure you check out those notes and we'll include some of the links to things that I know are her favorites and that Louise Hay book and some resources that you can put into action today. See you soon.